Pseudo-Legendaries, some of the most epic and powerful Pokemon in the entire series. They're often very rare to find in-game, and when you capture one, they are incredibly tough to train. But if you can, the reward for taming these mythical beasts is plentiful and result in arguably some of the strongest Pokemon in each respective region. But just who is the best of the best? We're going to answer that question today though when I rank every Pseudo-Legendary from worst to best. Now these rankings won't be solely based on stats and battling prowess, but a multitude of things such as viability, design, and even importance to the franchise. Alright then, without further ado, let's get started with number 10. Coming in 10th place is the newest Pseudo, Baxcalibur. Now by no means is Baxcalibur bad. Its stats are solid and pretty well balanced. It's just he's the new kid on the block. He's the young gun, and he's had the least amount of time to shine. It's earned its spot at the bottom of the list for that reason. That, and its design is probably the worst in the whole archetype. He just seems like his existence is a painful one. Don't get me wrong though, I used one on my team in my first playthrough of Scarlet, and it was probably the MVP. I gotta give it a lot of credit for not being a super elusive Pokemon to find either. Normally Pseudos are pretty hard to find, but Frigibax was an easy find and capture. Then evolving it wasn't too bad either. In a generation filled with nonsense evolution methods, just getting it to level 54 wasn't too bad. Then, once he was a Baxcalibur, very few Pokemon were able to stand up to a Dragon Dance boosted Glaive Rush or Icicle Crash. Next up in 9th place we have Goodra. Of all the Pseudo-Legendaries, Goodra feels the most plain. And this isn't just a problem among the Pseudo-Legendaries, she's one of the most plain dragons too. She's kinda just a big clump of slime, and we've already seen that before. The design, along with Goodra probably being the most underwhelming Pseudo in battle, earns her this low spot on this list. To be honest, on my first playthrough of Pokemon X, I initially thought Noivern was the Pseudo-Legendary of Kalos. And also, on another note, Goodra's evolution method is goofy and kinda unnecessary. It's definitely not all bad from Goodra though. I mean, for a long while, Goodra was arguably Ash's best Pokemon ever, with that 100% win rate. Plus, it was the MVP of one of the best anime battles ever, which of course was Ash vs. Clement. Then she kind of fell off, but we don't really talk about that. Also, Legends Arceus provided us with his Hisuian Goodra, who gave even more defenses to an already bulky Mon. Adding that steel typing helped makes Hisuian Goodra's resistances plentiful, and she definitely needed it. In 8th place is Komo. Where do I start with Komo? I'll admit, he's probably got the coolest name of any of the Pseudos. I mean, there's literally a hyphen in the middle of his name. That's bold, and I love it. However though, pretty much everything else about Komo feels pretty plain to me. You know, he just gives a very mid vibe to me. He definitely hasn't aged well as the series moved forward. However, in the Ultra games, Komo was a force to be reckoned with. Totem Komo was a pretty tough battle if you didn't have a Mimikyu, and its signature Z-move, Clangorous Soul Blaze, was among the best in the entire collection of Z-moves. It would do massive damage, then increase every non-accuracy based stat. But now Z-moves are gone for 2 generations, so yeah. Well, I don't have much more to say about Komo besides his best days are definitely behind it. Next up is Hydragon. Of all the Pseudo-Legendaries, Hydragon is the one that I have the least amount of connection to. I of course did play the Black and White games, but I obviously never used one because of his crazy evolutionary method. I mean, you gotta get a Zweilous all the way up to level 64? Yeah, I never did that. Hydragon is definitely no joke though. It has the highest special attack stat of any of the Pseudos, and a really solid typing, as long as it stays away from those pink Pokemon. There are a few things holding Hydragon back from being higher on this list though. First of all, it got like no moments to shine in the anime. I mean, it's definitely been in the anime, but normally it's painted in a very dark light. Cameron's secret weapon for the Unova was a Hydragon, but that battle between him and Ash is widely regarded to be one of the worst in the entire anime. Then in Journeys, Lance's Hydragon just appears only to get dunked on by Diantha's Gardevoir. Overall, Hydragon's a Pokemon that deserves 2 things. First, a bit more shine and love from the Pokemon Company, and 2, it needs to evolve at a lower level. But I can't lie, the design and concept for this Pokemon is amazing. From one scary dragon to the next, taking the 6th place on today's list is Salamence. Salamence is just an amazing Pokemon, period. He's really everything a Pseudo-Legendary should be. He's got an intimidating design, as well as the power and moxie to sweep through teams with ease. Also, Salamence has an abundance of great forms. I mean, Mega Salamence, well, sorta goofy looking, was a force to be reckoned with back in Gen 6 and Gen 7. And taking inspiration from Megaments is Roaring Moon, who's one of the strongest Pokemon introduced in all of Paldea. And finally, Salamence was my weapon of choice to Dynamax in the Sword and Shield games. I would Dynamax him, then use Max Airstream to pick up a KO. That would result in a boosted speed stat, and with Moxie, a boosted attack stat. It was a Dragon Dance that did damage. But you may be wondering, why is Salamence only at the midpoint of this ranking? Well, that's because there are others that do what he does, but they do it better. Stick around and you'll see what I mean. In 5th place is Salamence's Gen 3 pseudo-sibling Metagross. I rank Metagross slightly above Salamence because there was simply much more risk taken with Metagross, and it obviously paid off big time. With Salamence, we've seen the Flying Dragon done before, but what we hadn't seen was a Psychic and Steel type supercomputer. Metagross was near impossible to use in the games, especially in Hoenn, where we would only get one Beldum from Steven Stone only after winning the league. And yeah, I was able to use him here and there in Elite Four rematches in the Battle Frontier, but it all changed in the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire games. Game Freak gave out a mystery gift during the early ORAS days with a shiny Beldum holding a Metagross site, and on my first playthrough of Alpha Sapphire, I used him. And once I got him up to the very fair level of 45, Shiny Metagross basically became a free win button. The only real trouble it ever had was against Steven's Mega Metagross, a real fight fire with fire type of battle. Oh, and speaking of Steven's Metagross, his in the anime was probably the coolest Pokemon we've ever seen. Now look, some of the Pokemon on this list have haters, but I've never met a Metagross hater in my entire life. Next up in 4th place is the original pseudo, Dragonite. Dragonite is the catalyst for not only what Pseudo-Legendary should be, but also the Dragon type as a whole. I mean, in the first generation, Dragonite's evolutionary line was all there was to represent the Dragon typing. And it was the perfect fit. Dragonite separates itself from every other pseudo on this list, as it finds a happy medium between being a lovable beast, but an absolutely scary monster. Like, for me, I probably wouldn't want to give a Salamence or Baxcalibur a hug, but Dragonite? Oh, I definitely would. I think this is exemplified perfectly by Ashes in the anime. In battle, she was an absolute force, and would take down champion level mons with very little training. But then, outside of battle, she was the mother of Ash's Journey's team, who was a big hugger. I remember my first time seeing a Dragonite. I had made my way through the first 3 members of the Elite Four in my Fire Red playthrough. I entered the door to a long pathway until I finally made my way across from Lance. Now, Fire Red was my first game, and I had no idea that the Dragon typing was even a thing. I made my way through most of Lance's team, till he sent one out. A level 60 Dragonite. I was amazed by this. What the heck is this mystical creature, I asked myself. It then went on to sweep my team with outrage. But since then, Dragonite has aged very well. While it hasn't gotten new forms, Mega Evolutions, or Z-moves like others on this list, it really doesn't need them. I'd argue right now in Gen 9 Competitive is when Dragonite's at its absolute best. On Showdown, I sweep through teams using Dragon Dance Extreme Speed with a normal Terra typing. I will forever love Dragonite, and he will always be the face of Pseudo-Legendary Pokemon. Taking the bronze medal today is Dragapult. Now if you know me, you know I'm the biggest Gen 8 hater on the internet. If you've seen any of my ranking videos, I normally put Galar at the bottom of most lists. But Dragapult is different. I used one in my first and only playthrough of Sword, and he was undoubtedly my best Pokemon. I'll start my praises of Dragapult with the design. You look at this Mon, and it just looks fast. The sleek colors on it really give off a strong reptile dragon-like feel that's so fitting for him. Then that semi-translucent tail does a perfect job depicting it as a ghost type. Its balanced stats leave it open to do a multitude of things in battle. I've seen both Choice Band and Choice Specs run on this pseudo, but my personal favorite is running it as a lead-off. I give it a Focus Sash, then I set up at least 1 Dragon Dance, maybe 2 if my opponent doesn't do any damaging moves, and then everything else is catching 2 Dreepies to the face with Dragon Darts. Dragon Darts may just be my favorite signature move in the game right now. It beats subs and sashes, and it's literally the most insane concept for a move ever. And also, I gotta give a special shout out to Leon's Dragapult in the anime. He turned the tide of the battle against Ash with that dang Dragon Tail moveset of his. And he even took down Mega Plot Armor in that battle. In second place, we have probably the most notorious Pseudo-Legendary. You know who I'm talking about. Cue the music. Yup, it's Garchomp. What even really needs to be said about this absolute monster? We all share a core memory of at least one time losing to this beast in our Sinnoh playthroughs. Cynthia and Garchomp are like the dynamic duo of Sinnoh, and rightfully so. Garchomp is like the best Pokemon ever. You know Garchomp is an amazing Pokemon when its base form outclasses its Mega form. But also, can we talk about how Cynthia's never misses a freaking Dragon Rush attack? Sorry. They've just lived in my head rent-free ever since I was like 7. In the anime, we got teased in Diamond and Pearl by the writers. They gave Ash a Gibble and just didn't have it evolve. And now that I think about it, Ash probably beats Tobias if he's got a Garchomp. But of course, Cynthia's Garchomp had tons of epic moments like whooping on Paul and Iris. But coming in first, he's big, he's bad, and he's the best pseudo-legendary of them all, Tyranitar. My freaking boy T-Tar. Tyranitar is an absolutely perfect Pokemon. Far and away the best Pokemon introduced in both the Gen 1 and Gen 2 games, and it's not close in the slightest. Tyranitar was intentionally created to show off the new Dark typing introduced in Gen 2, and boy did he. Sorry Umbreon fans, but when I think of a Dark type, I think of this guy. He's just one scary dude, even if they kinda did him dirty with the 3D models. Now in battle, do I even have to tell you how sick he is? I mean, he was the original non-legendary Pokemon to cause weather appearing just by him switching in. He just spawns sandstorms. As long as he stays away from those karate chops, Tyranitar's either gonna soak up some hits, or he's gonna do his little dragon dance and get out the brooms and sweep. Well guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. Remember, this ranking was only based on my opinion, but I'm dying to hear your rankings of each of the pseudo-legendaries, so be sure to drop your rankings in the comment section below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing.